Good morning, members of the media. Good morning to those listening and viewing us live on social media. This morning, this press conference here is primarily get at addressing two major subjects that are putting into life in St. Lucia today. I have here with me my colleague, Senator Polius, who will be addressing allegations of sexual harassment in the police force, and I will be speaking on the other major issue of crime in St. Lucia as it exists today. And so after making our statements, we will give the media an opportunity to ask whatever questions that you wish to. We are going to start off with Senator Polius, who will be making her presentation on the allegations of sexual harassment in the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Senator Polius, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, fellow St. Lucians and members of the media, our viewers. Before I delve into my presentation, I just want to, on behalf of the United Workers' Party and the Dennery North UWP constituency branch, extend condolences to Mrs. Stanislaus and her family on the passing of the loved one, Mr. Ferdinand Stanislaus, affectionately known as Tipwet. Mr. Stanislaus was a loyal UWP stalwart and a founding member of the Mothers and Fathers group in the Dennery Valley. I also want to extend my heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Nikki, who was fatally shot about a week and a half ago. Our sympathies are with the families and friends of the other three individuals who met their demise through gun violence during the Dennery Carnival celebrations that was over the weekend. And of course, those who also met their demise in the Castries vicinity. We know that it is a very difficult time for all of you. We just want to let you know that we mourn with you. And so now I will go right into a more substantive matter of today's press conference. Outrage, shock, and appall would sum up my feelings about the ongoing events within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Central to my frustration is the apparent reluctance of our Prime Minister and the Labour Party administration to decisively deal with the allegations of sexual misconduct, against the acting police commissioner. I cannot begin to imagine the horror, grief, and pain that these female police officers endure. The shame and mental trauma is painful, and it takes years and sometimes decades to overcome. And to make it worse, asking these women to work in the very same environment where they can watch their alleged sexual abuser receive one promotion after another and ascend the ranks of the police force? How much more insensitive, callous, and inhumane can this be? Today, as a woman, a mother, community leader, and parliamentarian, I join the women's arm of the United Workers' Party and all women in this country in calling on this Labour administration to act in good conscience. And I repeat, to act in good conscience, to act on principle instead of political expediency. We call upon the Prime Minister to show the women across all sectors and workplaces in this country that he genuinely cares about their welfare and safety. I stand with our female police officers who have been charged with the responsibility for enforcing the law of the state and for protecting us. These three women are powerful, not because they were not frightened or they had not been threatened, but because they demonstrated remarkable courage to disclose the evil that was done to them despite their fears. So I stand with them. I stand with the other police officers who, out of tremendous fear and threats of victimization, have opted to remain silent. As women, we know how devastating and embarrassing the situation is to you. And that's why you bottle up the hurt, the pain, and the grief. We feel your pain. We know that perhaps you have received countless threats which render you helpless, powerless, and leaving you with no courage to speak out. We know that. But how? How much longer can you deal with this nightmare? How many more aspiring and existing police officers, the female police officers, how many of them have to suffer the same fate if you simply stay quiet and let the alleged molester get away with this heinous act? We want you to know that you are not the only one in this. We are there with you. And the only way to stop this vicious cycle of sexual assault and misconduct is to speak out. This behavior cannot be allowed to continue. As a woman and as a parliamentarian, I stand with the many young girls and teenagers who have been violated sexually or have been taken advantage of by public officers and public officials, who have had to stifle their trauma and conceal their psychological wounds in exchange for some hush money. Fellow St. Lucians, this is a reality, and we cannot pretend that it doesn't happen. We cannot continue to fail our girls and women. I stand with them. The women's arm of the United Workers' Party stands with them. These allegations are too serious for the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security to trivialize or to shove it under the carpet. And you know, the Prime Minister has the audacity to say that the content of the letter was mere accusations. Mr. Prime Minister, allegations of sexual harassment or assault surrounding the police commissioner, acting police commissioner, are not just allegations. These are serious charges that, if not investigated thoroughly, can threaten the very fabric of our nation. If these allegations are not dealt with appropriately, they squash the confidence of the citizenry in the police force. Mr. Prime Minister, if these are not handled well, these allegations can crush our efforts to reduce and stamp out crime in this country. And might I add, Mr. Prime Minister, that if such allegations are not treated with urgency and the level of seriousness required, they have the power to destroy the dreams and aspirations of our girls and women in this country. The post of acting police commissioner, we note, requires someone who has integrity, someone who demonstrates a commitment to maintain and preserve law and order in this country. But how is it, Mr. Prime Minister, that we can have an officer to lead the fight against crime when criminal allegations create a dark cloud of doubt over his own morality? How can an officer be entrusted to protect us and at the same time struggle to gain the trust of his own troop, let alone the public? This is a grave embarrassment to our police force and an indictment on you, Prime Minister. And where is the minister who's responsible for home affairs, gender relations, and public service? Isn't she duty-bound to respond to the concerns advanced by the female police officers? Why the silence? Why the silence on such critical issue? Madam Minister, why haven't you come out to publicly condemn such behavior and demonstrate some measure of sensitivity to the fundamental human rights of these female police officers and other women in this country? Why haven't you done that? And so, what message are you sending to the rest of the police force and the citizens of this country? That once they are good friends with the government, they are protected? This is ludicrous and total madness. And we cannot continue to allow this to fester in this country of ours. I want to encourage the Prime Minister to take a page from the book of the President of Guyana, where we've learned that one cabinet minister has been sent on leave to facilitate allegations of alleged rape of a 16-year-old. This is what should happen here. The time has come for you to relieve the acting commissioner of his duties and to allow for an impartial and transparent investigation into these allegations. Act on good principle. And we beg of you not to compromise the rights of our women in the police force and other workplaces in this country for political expediency. Our women are partners in nation building. The female police officers help to maintain law and order in this country. Let's protect them now. Politicizing our police force cannot and should never be tolerated. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Polius. A very powerful presentation here. And as we continue with the press conference, I am now going to address the issue of crime in St. Lucia. And that's a good segue from Senator Polius's contribution. Listening to Senator Polius, if we continue along this vein, we will fast become a lawless society. Among the primary responsibilities of a government is to see about the health, security, and safety of its people. Today, we see that our government is in dereliction of that duty, that responsibility. Today, we see that our Minister of National Security have abdicated on the responsibility that he has to see about the security and safety of our country. The same can be said of the Minister of Home Affairs. I speak now of the rampant, pervasive criminal activities taking place in our society. It seems as if that we can safely say now that the favorite pastime in St. Lucia on weekends is murders, committing murders. It has become commonplace for us to hear of multiple homicides taking place on weekends, particularly when there are major activities such as Independence, such as Carnival, to the extent that it has become so commonplace that we no longer are even alarmed by it. We no longer talk about it or discuss it. And our government seemingly is oblivious of the situation and turns a blind eye on what is happening. The deafening silence of the government on our crime situation, particularly with the extent of homicides we have in this country, speaks very loudly. I want to point out to St. Lucians, in case they have not realized, because it has become so rampant that perhaps some people have lost count or stopped counting, we are now just halfway through the year 2023, and we are approaching 50 homicides in St. Lucia. At this rate, we can easily record 100 or more St. Lucians losing their lives as a result of violent crime for this year. If this does not get the attention of our leaders in this country, if this is not sufficient for them to pay attention and to act, I do not know what will. St. Lucia, whether we recognize it or not, is in chaos, given the fact that criminal elements at will can just decide to take over social activities, entertainment, or normal life in our society. I want to remind St. Lucians once again that we have had the undesirable experience of curfews imposed by criminals in St. Lucia. And call it what you want. What happened in Vieux-Fort when we were forced to shut schools, businesses were forced to shut their doors, residents of that part of the country had to leave the streets and public areas by a certain time. You can describe it as what you want, but that was a criminal-imposed curfew on St. Lucians. I want us to take this very seriously, because not only has the ultimate negative experience is being perpetrated, that is the loss of life in St. Lucia, almost 50 homicides in 6 months. Our economy is in jeopardy. I want to remind St. Lucians and the government of St. Lucia once again that we are a tourist-based economy. When crime becomes so rampant in your society, and let us not forget that the criminal elements are indiscriminate. Not only locals have fallen to the violence of the criminal elements, but we also have foreigners who come from some of the countries that we depend on for our tourism have lost their lives as a result. These countries, unlike what I see with our government, regard the lives of their citizens very highly, and they take it very seriously. It is not inconceivable that we can end up having some kind of sanction imposed on St. Lucia, where in North America, in Europe, we can have governments calling on their citizens not to travel to St. Lucia. Are we going to wait for such advisories before we take decisive action? Are we going to wait until our economy is crippled before we take decisive action? Already, the vendor, the business operator in St. Lucia are under siege from the actions of criminals. What is our government doing about such a situation? Are we going to wait until all is lost before our leaders step up to their responsibilities? We have a situation now where our freedom is in jeopardy, our economy is in jeopardy, our lives is in jeopardy, and we are living in fear. It is no quality of life to be living in fear, to be living where you're not free, in a situation where you're not free, and to be living in a situation where you're in a country where you cannot thrive and conduct your economic activities. So for these very serious considerations, I call on the government to play their role and honor their responsibility and show leadership in demonstrating that they are prepared to take a stand and do something to ameliorate the crime situation that is taking place in St. Lucia currently. This last weekend, we had once again multiple homicides taking place in St. Lucia. During Dennery Carnival, we heard of 3 young people, including 2 young ladies, losing their lives through gun violence. There were another 2 cases previously, totaling some 5 St. Lucians losing their lives in one weekend. Have we heard from the Minister of National Security? Have we heard from the Minister of Home Affairs? Have we heard from the Prime Minister? So I want to say, when I reiterate my call to the Prime Minister to do something, and the least that he can do is to show that he is serious as a leader and that he takes his responsibilities seriously. And if he, as national security, does not have the answers, if he is unwilling or unable to do something about the situation that we are facing, that he take the initiative in his capacity as Prime Minister and dismiss himself as Minister of National Security, because he has been an abject failure as far as that is concerned. I want to now call on the Prime Minister as well to take a serious look at his cabinet. Do a serious assessment of the performance of his ministers and dismiss the Minister of Home Affairs. You cannot tell me that coincidentally we have a woman as Minister of Home Affairs. And in case some of you do not remember or realize, the Minister of Home Affairs has direct responsibility for the police. You just heard Senator Polius spoke a few minutes ago of the allegations, the serious allegations that are being leveled at the acting police commissioner. What have we heard from the Minister of Home Affairs? What have we heard from the Prime Minister? What have we heard from the government? There is another woman who sits in cabinet, okay, who is a policy maker, okay, has Honorable Emma Hippolyte come out and make a statement in condemnation of the allegation of such behavior, given the allegations that were made. Has she come out in any way to demonstrate any solidarity or support for the police officers, the female police officers, who are making the allegations, who at least deserve that their complaint be taken seriously, investigated, and a resolution brought? In addition, we as a society, the citizenry of St. Lucia, will be looking to the police, our premier crime-fighting agency, who themselves are not there solely to enforce the law, but are expected as well to uphold the law. What message are you sending to would-be perpetrators of crime when we get the impression that even within the primary law enforcement agency of our country, indiscipline, criminal behavior, and violence, especially against women, is being brushed aside or being tolerated. What message are we sending to the rest of the society? And besides, we must remember too that as important as the police force is to us in St. Lucia in the upkeep of law and order, in the maintenance of security and safety, they must appear to have the legitimacy, the authority, and the integrity that the citizens of St. Lucia expect of them. Again, I call on the Prime Minister to play the leadership role that is expected of him, that he has requested of the people of St. Lucia, and they have placed their confidence in him, and he has a responsibility to respond and come forward and let us know what is the position of the government on those matters. I also want to mention too what we saw on social media in circulation recently, that is the claims made by one of his ministers, no less than the minister in the Prime Minister's office with responsibility for housing, Honorable Richard Frederick. It is no secret to the St. Lucia Labour Party and the current government the reputation, the history, okay, and allegations surrounding that minister. Here we have that minister making claims, again, of criminal activity, where he expresses that he fears for his life and that his life was placed in danger. But more importantly, and what I listened to attentively and keenly, knowing that he is in a position of leadership, is a part of our government today, he has to be very careful and responsible as to his utterances. The minister clearly came out and indicated that he would have taken the law in his own hands, something that we as a society discourage, something that the police ask us, ordinary citizens, not to do. What is the Prime Minister saying about that situation, given the fact that it involves a member of his cabinet? Already, the very present government has told us a lot about the Honorable Richard Frederick. They have failed to come out and explain quite a number of situations associated with the allegations that came from them. That is, they insinuated that the Honorable Richard Frederick is connected to money laundering, drug trafficking, and other criminal behavior, even insinuations of murder. Do we want to have individuals with such allegations swirling over their heads as people in leadership and powerful positions in our country? You have a police commissioner with allegations swirling around him, and it's my understanding that before he was appointed as acting police commissioner, those allegations had already been made. Are those the kinds of people we're going to place in powerful leadership positions in our country and expect that the rest of our citizens will have respect, regard for authority or for law and order? What message are you sending to criminals? I think the Prime Minister must, at this point, come out and make a decisive statement about all of those issues that I have raised. One, the continuing rampant, pervasive, violent activities in this country and the number of homicides that we are seeing. We are on course to once again set a new record this year. These are not the kinds of records we want to be setting as a country. He must come out and make a statement, a decisive, definitive statement, about the situation regarding the police commissioner and the allegations of sexual assault. He must come out and say something about the comments and the allegations made by his most notorious member of cabinet, Honorable Richard Frederick, and the fact that he was on social media publicly promoting taking the law into your own hands. We want to know what the Prime Minister thinks of those situations. And we want to know what is the Prime Minister doing about the fact that the Minister of National Security is an abject failure, whether he's going to let us continue for another 3 years with a comatose, paralyzed Minister of National Security whose leadership has not been apparent, has not been felt, and is sorely lacking. What is he doing about a Minister of Home Affairs who herself has proven to be a failure, not only for the way she is handling the allegations of sexual assault, but of course, we know in the less than 2 years that she has been in office, we have a passport scandal that she has presided over. St. Lucians cannot afford to continue down that slippery slope that we're heading, because if we don't turn things around now, I'm afraid in 3 years' time, all would be lost and it'll be too late. At this juncture, I want to take the opportunity to commend the women of the United Workers' Party, Senator Polius and your colleagues, for taking the stance that you all have. You all could have remained quiet. You all could have pretended that you all didn't hear, didn't see, or don't know, because personally, none of you were affected. And that is what we must remember as a society. When injustice is not done to us, and we keep quiet, when injustice comes to us, there'll be no one to speak for us. Mm-hmm. And so it is commendable on the part of the women of the United Workers' Party that they take a stand and let their voices be heard on this matter of sexual assault against female police officers. Because if female police officers can be subjected to that kind of violent crime and assault, sexual assault, what do we expect when it comes to ordinary women in our society? And I understand tonight there is a forum, again, by women of the United Workers' Party. I commend them on that. All I want to say, though, is that not only in opposition, but I expect the very same when the United Workers' Party forms the government, knowing that some of you will be in leadership positions, that you continue along that same vein. I thank you. So we are now open to questions from the media. Well, I saw it during the week. Early in this week, I saw the Honorable Richard Frederick on a program with Shelton Daniel, claiming that he was followed by a car and what he did and so on. He never mentioned that he called the police. He never sought to go to a safe place, a public place where, so on. But he did indicate, interestingly, that while he thought that the people were following him, perhaps in his mind to assassinate him, he slowed down and on one occasion stopped. Well, I've heard of drive-by shooting. I wonder what that means. If you're going to allow or give the opportunity for people to drive by when you think that they are out to get you, like he indicated. What I'm saying is the way that it was handled, and by the way, the minister actually indicated that a lot of his actions was inspired and driven by his police instincts.
Yes.
I mean, it is laughable It is laughable, you know. However, it is serious. We have to take it seriously. And when you talk about you came out of your vehicle and you positioned yourself, and if a mosquito or fly, whatever he said, had come out of the car, they would get it. What kind of language is that coming from a minister of government? He was not in a provoked situation where temper was raising and so on. He came to a program after the fact, calmly and composed, making those kinds of statements. Here is someone who is a legal officer by profession. Here is someone who has had police training and experience. Here is someone who is a member of cabinet, a member of parliament, which makes him a legislator in this country. And you have that kind of statement coming from him. And people think that that is fine, that is cool, that is okay. The Prime Minister condones that. We cannot have that kind of lawlessness starting from the top in our country. The government must set the example, and the government must take the lead. And we are calling on them to do that now. Thank you. Yeah.
My colleagues come to the last time. You're not watching politics, you're watching common sense. Crime is something no government can really do to say cap it, to say cap it. You do not know the intentions of anybody at any time. It happened within your administration, it's happening now. When we say police and governments are getting blamed for the crime that people do. Why we are saying yes, that government has to put certain things in place to make sure that things happen. But if things are already in place by both you and them, and it is still happening, what is going wrong? That's what I have to move from you.
Okay, my response.
I'm saying, you put things in place, they put things in place, but the crime is still going on. Police cannot be everywhere. I cannot decide what Senator here will do if she lives outside, or what you're going to do when you live outside. That we cannot predict. No government cannot predict that.
Fair enough.
Cannot predict it, I cannot predict it. So then what will we do? Do we have a social, while we are saying policing, is it a social program or is it a policing program?
Okay.
Problem, sorry, not program. That's the question I have to ask. So while we are saying yes, police cannot be everywhere, but do we have a social program within the country that's causing a problem? It doesn't matter. Government come, government go, because one will come, one will go, and will you end up a recurring decimal? What's the problem?
Okay, I am not one of those who believe that we will ever have a utopia where we have a totally crime-free society. I'm not one of those who believe that. Because it doesn't matter what you do, there are among us those who are warped, those who are psychos, those who will find a way to perpetrate crime one way or the other. However, there are those of us who have responsibilities to fight and control criminal activity and to preserve law and order. And I will not allow, whether it is the police, the government, or whatever agency who is charged with the responsibility to do those things, to feel that they can abdicate their responsibility and get away with it scot-free. No, government is not directly involved in the crime-fighting effort, but government sets policies, government provides resources, and government sets the tone. Our leaders, by their examples, by their utterances, by their behavior, sets the tone for the rest of the country. If, when such rampant, wanton criminal activity, homicides are taking place in this country, and we hear nothing from our leaders, I am beginning to think that it's okay. It is small wonder that people no longer even talk of those things. People are not even alarmed by it anymore. Because if the government that has to take the lead, and that's what we have to remember, they have a responsibility to provide leadership. And they couldn't be bothered. Why should I be bothered? In the case of the police, they cannot be everywhere, and they cannot prevent every crime. but they must be seen to be doing their jobs. They must be seen to have integrity so that we have confidence in them. Situations, and there are good police officers, but we have to weed out the bad elements that gives the police force a bad reputation. For example, when a criminal commits a heinous crime and is apprehended by the police, and next day you're hearing that he has escaped, and no heads roll, no explanation, no major investigation, what message are you sending to the rest of the society? So all I'm saying is that we all have our role to play. Now, talking about social programs, yes, social programs have a role to play. The family has a role to play. The churches, the community organizations all have a role to play. But may I say to you, the situation existing in St. Lucia today requires immediate, urgent action. Those measures by the social organizations or social programs, the community activists and the organizations, the churches, the educational system, and so on, is medium and long term. What we need now is an immediate halt to what is happening. Like I said, that new pastime that is developing in St. Lucia to have multiple murders every weekend must stop. That business of my freedom being compromised, where I don't feel I am safe in my country or in my society anymore, must stop. That has to come from the top. The government must lead the charge in addressing those situations. So I am not talking politics, I'm talking reality, I'm talking life. The government asked for the responsibility. They claimed they had the answers to the problems. Deal with it. They are not even... I'm not here criticizing a policy or a statement. I am here lamenting inaction. I have heard nothing after 5 St. Lucians met their demise over the weekend. So, yes, it is not a question of politics. It goes beyond that. It is our life, it is our sustenance, it is our survival, it is our freedom. Okay? So.
A question on social, right?
Yeah.
Because most of the problems we have is, if you notice, young people between the ages of, let's say, between 15 and 35. That's where all the problems are between that age group. Now, this weekend we saw between 17, 18, 20 something years going down the drain. Where, speaking to an ex-UWP minister in 1988, I remember that clearly, when I asked him, what have you done? I live in Central Castries. I did ask him, what have you done? He said, but I do everything for you already. You have a hospital, you have this, you have that, you have that. What can I do for you? Where I have failed you is in social programs. That was in 1980. Today, we are seeing governments come in and go. And to spend on social programs, it costs too much. That's what I was told. It costs too much by both governments. So basically, governments are failing us.
Well, I can...
Hold on. That is when I ask the question. They say it costs too much. And that is where we go down the drain. Our fabric finishing in the social programs. We might invest a lot in other stuff, but our social programs with our kids, our parents, not enough social programs in the country. The children going down, look, vacation coming there. How many social programs? A lot of the centers all around the island, most of them closed. Where those kids going? On the blocks they're going. Basically they're recruiting them on the blocks, and then it ends up bursting in our face. It doesn't matter what government is doing. We are failing, and that's what both governments refuse to say. We are failing our people in social programs. They may be very smart to come and tell you it's not so, it's not so, both red and yellow, it's not so, it's not so, it's not so. But we failing the people in social programs. That's why it bursts in both when you are there. Presently the one that it bursting in your face all the time. Social programs, my brother.
Okay, can I respond to you?
Yeah, you could go ahead.
Now, I cannot speak for the St. Lucia Labour Party administration, but I am in a perfect position to speak on behalf of the United Workers' Party, because I was responsible for social services in that government. During my tenure, even during COVID, I got an increase in my budget for social programs. Is it enough? I'll be the first to tell you no. And while government provide resources, the society has to step up as well to play their part. And that's what I am saying, has to play their part. But having said so, the social programs on their own will not cut it. And I think the targeting of the social programs is off. I am in a position to tell you that. Because when you say to me, you organize, because you talk about the holidays coming, a summer camp, your son, who is under parental control and discipline and everything, will be there. My children will be there. That your son does not need it as much. My children do not need it as much as the little boy who has no parental guidance and control, who's running around the street. They are the people who need it. We have to actually go into the boroughs, the alleys, and the holes where crime is festering, where we have disturbed young people, and meet them at their level on their turf and try to appeal to them. When you go to church and you pray for the next 24 hours, they are not there. They do not come to church. You are not talking to them. You are not reaching them. We have to devise programs where we can better target the people who need to be targeted. Of course, the economy, all of those things come into play, because if I cannot afford to provide for my children, or I have to be so engaged in making ends meet and that the children are on their own, all of those things have to be taken into consideration. So it is a multi-pronged approach. I'm not denying that. And the school, well, let me start with the family, because as parents we have our responsibilities. The family, the church, the community organization, the government, all agencies have a role to play. I am now addressing the fact that at this juncture, the major action that is required is on the part of the government. And in any case, they have to provide the leadership that is necessary, that is required to stem the tide. They have to set the example, they have to set the tone. And so it is not a case of saying this government did and that government did. It's a question of the present government are the ones, is in a position to do something about it, and they are not. I have heard members of that government say that what they have done in the past has not worked. So what is it that you come in that is new, with that is new? I would be happy to criticize or add or suggest what can be done differently to what they're doing. But I'm appalled that nothing is being done, that I'm not even hearing from the people who have the responsibility to do something about it. The least they can do is come out and make a statement, and that is not even being done. And we have to accept as a country that the Minister of National Security is a dismal failure. Okay? Is a dismal failure, and under his watch we are seeing the consequences of his lackluster performance. Homicides, what he refers to as homicides. We are seeing the consequences of it. You know. Thank you. All right.